that I learned a year ago when I started learning about emerging technologies. This is a little bit about me, so you know the context. I am a UX designer. I've been working within a lab that explores emerging technologies, including voice and blockchain, for the last year. And I've been a designer for 13 years, and I also focus a lot in what I talk and what I write on the intersection of design, tech, and business, because I feel like this intersection is the one that produces really great products. So a year ago, I started working in a really highly technical team. I used to work in a UX team, and I changed on purpose to be able to learn other kinds of technologies. So this presented a challenge, but it also presented an opportunity because I was able to learn so much more, especially emerging technologies. And as I was learning and going through trainings, I started to develop these strategies to learn the technology and be able to work with my team. Because as I said, I was and I am the only designer. And I also really like the technology part of my team. So I wanted to be able to collaborate with them. So why do I do this, especially for voice? I feel like we are in the introduction phase, and you've seen it for the past 3 days, but we are also in the introduction phase for UX because we don't have any methodology yet to design for voice. We don't have a framework, we don't have established patterns, so we're learning as we go. As such, I feel that we need to be in the conversation. Sometimes I've seen and I thought that it was highly tech-driven until I came to this conference, and I realized that there's much more. There's a lot of emphasis in UX as well. So one of the strategies that I have developed is to identify a couple of key concepts. It's more like 3 or 4 that I can use to talk to any other team that is not UX. So for example, to talk with business or to talk with a technical team. And what I mean by parallels is that when I learn the technology, I start like linking some of these concepts to the ones that we are used to. So I'm gonna go over these 4. Let me know if you want me to expand on any, because I realize that almost every session throughout the conference has talked about this. So I'm just gonna talk about how I feel that it maps to the UX methodology. So the first one, the skill and action, when I learned about this, I immediately thought about the user goal when we create personas. And how many designers are here today? Cool. So when we do personas and we uncover the goal of each of these personas, for me, this is really important when you talk about a skill or an action. Because maybe sometimes you start with a skill and then you realize that that's not a goal that your user has. So it's an opportunity to iterate with your technical team. And then the intent, for me, I see it like the many tasks that the user has to accomplish to be able to get to their goal. So when I learn about intent, I start thinking about how can I do a task analysis, how that would be a great way to start a prototype as well. Then the utterances, for me, is really straightforward, and it's about the language of the user. When we do it in user research before voice, we uncover what are the ways that the user communicates, and we use that in all of the interfaces that the user goes through. And for voice is more relevant than ever. Once you have to discover what's the language of your given user to be able to come up with these utterances and train the application. And then lastly, the slots. For me, they talk about the context of the users. This is something else, again, that we discover throughout the user research, and it can change from, it could be the same question and have different answers for the same user in different time frames or different mindsets. And these are like the 3 or 4 key elements that I feel like if someone that doesn't know anything about voice and it's a UX designer can start learning and be in the same room with other teams, especially highly technical teams. So I did this for other emerging technologies as well, and when I implemented this with my team and saw that if I use these terms instead of the UX terms, we were able to be in the same page faster, I realized that these were the main benefits of doing this. The first one is the brainstorming. It was much more straightforward to say, for example, if you're gonna create a design for a skill, say, throughout our research, we've identified these intents from the user instead of saying it in the UX jargon. Then for the prototyping and delivery of insights, it's really important to know what you need to deliver for the application when you're doing the prototypes and deliver in those terms. They're gonna, the technical team is gonna be on board faster, and you're gonna be able to iterate faster as well, because you're gonna be iterating in the elements of the technology. And lastly, you can also build your own, because these key elements, if you know it and you understand it, and you have the toolkits that Amazon and Google Assistants are putting in place, then you can, you have an idea, you can just build your own. And I also wanted to touch on what I think of when I start collaborating with the technical team. And this could be for voice, but it could also be for other emerging technologies. And you're gonna see it on the first one. For this one, I call it like, why would you say it? Because we know, especially throughout this conference, that there are many opportunities for a voice interface to be better than a graphical interface. But the user doesn't know it yet. Like, they have to go through a phase where they have to try it. And that's, I feel, is one of the hardest part, like to get the user to actually try the application. So it's really important to, throughout the user research, to spot those opportunities where they will be willing to use it. They would see a value before trying it. Second, this is a really good tool after the user research to start generating user stories, because that's one of the links that I have with the technical team that is really effective, where we can both design these user stories and use it to assess success. And lastly, I really like data, so I always include something about key performance indicators. So I really like during the brainstorming and at the end saying, what would be success for this voice application, for example? So what would be the indicators that are user-centric, more than functional, more than whether it works or not, or whether it makes money for the business? What would be success for them? What would be the value added? For example, if you're doing an application that is booking a trip, and your indicator is just booking the trip, the user might made a mistake and then cancel the trip. Like, sometimes we just go up until the point of something working and not checking if the user was actually happy with the end product. And that's it. That's the tips that I have and the ideas that I have to be able to work with other teams other than UX. And also, if you have a team where they want to start getting into voice design, I feel this is going to help them a lot. So if they learn these four concepts, they're going to be ready to start brainstorming and start creating something for the user. And especially, they're going to feel, because that's what I went through, they're going to feel that this is another interface, but their process is the same. So you lower the barrier to enter into this technology for designers. That's it. Any questions? So I might start for the thing that I feel like it makes it easier, and it is the fact that you're used to talking. So that's, for me, that's one of the advantages. And the challenge is that many people rely in, I don't know, in training, memory, graphics. Sometimes you have that opportunity to like onboard the user. Like, there's always like, you can do an onboarding, you can do, even if the application is intuitive, but it's something new, you do an onboarding, and then it's intuitive enough for them to use it. They don't have to go back. Like, there's one principle where you just have to tell them what they can do with the application and then let them go, and that's it's considered intuitive. And in this case, that's not the case. Like, it needs to be intuitive from day one. The expectation is the same as the expectation that I have when I talk to someone. So that would be, I would say that's the challenge, but there are many more. Any other question?